Welcome, everybody. As we're starting to make our way into the afternoon, John Chivacco with Aztec Geothermal. If you've been here, you probably have seen me speak a little bit. Glad to have everyone here. So we've got two programs in a row. This one is about largely focused on the New York State Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act pilots. And we've got a representative from the Department of Public Service, which is trying to help wrangle all this together and make sense of it for the state. And we've also got 3 utilities represented. And I really appreciate them being willing to come up and share what they can share. There's other utilities involved in this too. The 7 largest utilities, I think, was the term, or certainly there was 7 utilities. And from that, initially there was 15 projects. And now I think it's around 13 or maybe even 12 projects that are on a track to move forward. And thermal energy networks are, the utility versions of these is an attempt for largely natural gas utilities, but it could be electric or gas utilities, to engage in something that is, say, an alternative to natural gas or a new renewable energy technology that would come as a service that they provide. And so these pilots are ways to inform us about how that will occur. Last year, some of you that were here, we heard from Eversource. We also heard from folks in Vermont that are looking into this. So it's not just a New York thing if you're new to this space. It's happening in many parts of the country. But there's so much activity happening in New York, and I think that our Department of Public Service is making a real strong attempt to try to find a structured way to understand how these pilots should move through the funding process, through the build, and ultimately what can we learn from them, and then expand that program potentially into a new utility that is on a regulated basis. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And so I'm going to start out. So we've got Joe Hitt from the Department of Public Service, who's here, Cole Burgess from NYS RG&E, which are the Avangrid companies, Owen Brady, oh no, it's that married name of his again.
You're Chivacco, C-H, say it like a C-H.
Trachak. Good enough. Oh no, and then Caitlin. Where are you from, Caitlin? That is not a Catskill name. All right, say your name for me. Sukata. I knew that T was just something to mess with me. All right. So we're going to hear from, we're going to start out with Joe with some of the structure about how we're trying to put these things together and some of the background from the legislation that came out in August of 2022 up to the present, and then we'll hear from the utilities. So take it away, Joe. We can clap for him, even though he's a...
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Hitt. I'm a policy analyst with the Department of Public Service in the Office of Markets and Innovation. What I'm going to talk to you about today is, well, first of all, I have a lot of slides, and I'm going to very quickly go through them. But the slides will be, yeah, John's tough on the time. Very, very quickly go through them, but the slides are available so you have them for reference.
And you can see your next slide. So that's what's on the screen. That's your next slide. I can't see anything. And you can't see.
All right, Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act. That's a case number that you may need in the future if you want to get to some documents that I'll be talking about. Let's just jump right in. Overview. The act passed in May of 2022 and amends various laws, including public service law, which directs the commission to initiate a proceeding within 3 months, which they did, and then promulgate rules and regulations within 2 years, which has just been started. I'll mention that a little later on. The law requires the 7 largest gas, electric, and combi gas and electric companies to propose within a few months the 1 to 5 thermal network pilot projects and at least one in a disadvantaged community. all the companies have proposed projects and all have proposed in disadvantaged communities. LIPA was also included in a requirement, and there's an amendment for the labor law, which we're not going to get into today, but there's documents that you can reference and read up on it if you like. Oops. Timeline to date. As you see, July 2022, that's when the, what we call UTEN, it was signed into law. And then in September 22, the commission initiated the proceeding. And then you can go down through and you'll see when the companies proposed their pilot projects, some tech conferences were held, comments from the public have been submitted. And then you get down to just recently, there's tech conference on some terms and definitions were filed in the case number that I mentioned a minute ago. There was also final pilot project proposals which the company submitted back in December. DPS staff filed the regulatory proposal which shows like the initial rules. And then a couple of weeks ago we had a tech conference on performance metrics.
And these slides will be available.
There's a lot of information, and it might be, it's way too much to read, so we'll have them all available to you. There was an initiating and guidance order. We're going to focus today on the guidance order. Here we go. The procedural approach, which John mentioned before, we're trying to come up with a strategic way to get through these pilot projects. And this is John's favorite slide. It shows the timeline and the phased approach that we're using to get through the projects. And I'm going to go through each one. Do you want the slide to stay up, or no. You good? Yeah. I know you like it, so.
Contrary to popular belief, it's not about me.
So the stagegate approach has 5 distinct stages. Stage 1, pilot project scope, feasibility, and stakeholder engagement. Stage 2 was pilot project engineering, design, and customer protection plan. Stage 3, customer enrollment and pilot project construction. And stage 4, pilot project operation and management. And 5 is the pilot project review, recommendations, and conclusion or closeout. Under the stage-gate approach, the utility pilot projects will proceed from one stage to the next with either staff approval or commission approval. And I'm sure some of you are asking, like, have any of them moved to stage 2 yet? The approval letters, let's call them, from staff actually just were filed a few minutes ago before this meeting. So all of the active pilots, a couple were withdrawn, all active pilots now have moved to stage 2, or there's feasibility concerns possibly in the letters.
That's big news, by the way.
For people who have been following, for those of you who have been following, it is huge news. We were hoping they would come out last night, but they just got filed a few minutes ago. So stage 1, we don't need to say too much on it. The projects have gone through stage 1 at the moment. And because of time, we're just going to jump to stage 2 because that's where we're at. Project scope, feasibility, and stakeholder engagement. The final UTEN pilot project proposals, they must include a preliminary customer protection plan, including a description of the required customer engagement activities, customer agreement template that recognizes customer protections. This is important, and it was, I don't want to say weak in the preliminary proposals, but we need a little bit more detail on that. If any of the utilities decide to withdraw a pilot project anywhere in the process, they can do so. They do need to file a reason why. We want to learn as we go why projects fail or not move on. To move to stage 2, staff is required to conduct a compliance review, which we just did. If staff confirms that the pilot projects comply with all the requirements of the Act, then the Director of ESPP, we call it, will file a letter confirming compliance and advancing the project. That was just done. If there's any non-compliance or concerns about feasibility, it will be noted in the letters. Advance to stage 3. After the letters are filed, within 9 months, the utilities need to file a pilot project engineering design and customer protection plan. The final UTEN pilot project engineering design and plans will be issued for public comment, and subsequent commission orders will determine whether the specific pilot projects can advance to stage 3. So that's important. If you want to submit pilot projects, there will be a comment period. 2 minutes already. We are going to just jump to the end. You can read up on the different phases as you go through. I want to get to the end because it's more important.
I love the end.
Old school, I got too many papers. Near-term timeline. The letters were today. They're out. April 25th, there's a tech conference for performance metrics. It's scheduled from 1 to 5. That tech conference will focus on identifying and developing financial, customer, and societal metrics. There will be a notice on where it's going to be in Albany here, and there will be a notice on how you can attend or WebEx in. Let's jump down to May 7th. There will be a second technical conference which is going to focus on technical safety and reliability metrics. Again, there will be a notice out to the public if anybody wants to participate. May 6th, which is important, back in February, staff filed a proposal for the initial thermal energy network rules. There is a comment period, and it's open until May 6th. And please comment and reference the case number that I mentioned earlier. It's 22M-0429. All of what I barely talked about and flipped through is available at these links. The legislation is at the top, the case number, the second one, and then the terms and definitions and the performance metrics each have their own matter number. And these are on what we call at DPS DMM. It's a document management matter website. It has everything we work on. It's a little clunky, but it has every document you're ever going to need if you want to learn about UTENs.
Look at that. I think we should give him a hand for that. He's got a heavy weight. Musical chairs.
Just enter.
Introduce yourself, sir.
Name's Cole Burgess. I'm a project manager for NYS and RG&E. I have not had a chance to read any sort of compliance letter, so that is new news. But wanted to introduce you guys to kind of who NYS and RG&E is. So NYSEG is a combination utility. As of right now, we provide electric and gas service. Are proposing to introduce thermal service as well per these projects. We've got about 3 million people served across the state of New York, covering many different territories from west, north, and to the south. Also, parent or sister company is Rochester Gas and Electric. That does serve about 1 million persons. Again, another combination utility, electric and gas served. Collectively, we do serve approximately 2 million customers in total between the two current fuels. So I'll kind of hop right into the projects. As of today, we are advancing one project per utility company. That is new news. Within the RG&E service territory, we do have a project proposed adjacent to downtown Rochester. That is the South Wedge neighborhood. That does encompass 21 proposed connected buildings, 17 residential, 4 non-residential. We are proposing a closed-loop geothermal system there. There are considerations with the geology there. So we are proposing at the moment to drill down to 300 feet, about 183 wells proposed. Do make note of the fact that the wells are considered to be proposed in existing parking lots. There will be customer considerations that will be touched on later. But this is kind of what's proposed to date for Rochester. This does kind of provide one large centralized building with a large cooling load, and then the adjacent neighborhood that is heating predominant to provide a thermally balanced system. Ithaca, we do have kind of a more unique project. This is actually an open loop proposed project. Open loop geothermal system is what's proposed. They do have a unique geology down there. They've got an underground aquifer that does allow for different design considerations than elsewhere in the state. This does allow to reduce the overall number of wells because you can increase the amount of thermal energy that is drawn through the system with the open loop design. In total, there's 16 wells, 8 supply and 8 discharge. There will be additional Department of Environmental Conservation permitting requirements considering this system type. We do have a larger overall number of buildings proposed to connect. We've got 39 in total, 8 non-residential, 31 residential. I do want to make note that the number of buildings does not necessarily dictate the number of connected customers. Within each building, there might be multiple different services, both on the electric and gas side. And a little bit of uniqueness here as well is we do have a neighborhood housing service building that is low moderate income based. So this is kind of representing what we're proposing to date in the Ithaca region. Ithaca does have a lot of kind of emergent technologies they're exploring as part of their Green New Deal. We have leveraged opportunities as able to further explore the geothermal space. We did have an opportunity to partner with a customer down there that has open loop groundwater systems that feed their chilled water system. They did allow for NYSEG to come on site and actually test the well to understand what the thermal resource extraction can be out of that resource. I do want to make note that the location of the wells does need to be very close in proximity to where the proposed projects are. There can be a lot of variance between the geology. Fortunately, this is directly adjacent to where our proposed project is, but wanted to kind of highlight the fact that this is a data verification point that does allude to the fact that there is acceptable water quality there for the proposed system design, and that the overall testing results did indicate that this has positive indications that it can support a district scale system within the general Ithaca region with that similar geology present. Kind of continuing on the customer and community engagement, as Joe alluded to, stage 2 is the next stage gating process from the DPS regulatory environment. Want to kind of make mention of a unique consideration here. So my opinion is this project kind of represents uniqueness. We're bringing a utility project solution to a need a customer may not know they have. So we are bringing a new technology type to an existing customer base that really is not familiar largely with this technology type. So kind of with that in mind, who are the customers? A customer itself is a very broad term. I believe everyone in this room, myself included, is a customer of this. We do have directly connected customers as well, and each customer has unique considerations. Within the engagement plan that we did file, there is accomplishment goals, so there is kind of stage gating process there. How do we get to the ultimate goal of having customers at the end of the day opt into the projects? Without customer commitment, there is no project to execute upon. What are the effective tactics to make that engagement and that opt-in possible? And then what are the considerations? Again, so we are proposing these as retrofit projects. With that, every single customer is unique. There is existing considerations for that. Landlords and tenants are both directly impacted parties from these projects. So just to kind of bring awareness to the larger body of persons here and just the effort as itself, each customer does have existing electric or gas service with the companies. Within that, there are several considerations. You've got billing considerations, you have critical facility status, you've got their personal perception of who NYSEG and RG&E and or whoever their utility service provider is. They may have their own personal perceptions of just the clean energy market. And then you've got any recent replacements of HVAC equipment. If you're a customer that just spent several $1,000s, you may have an opinion that you want value out of the equipment that you just replaced. You also have recent utility interactions, how have they engaged the company, and then you've got considerations of the type of utility service provided currently. In addition just to the engagement element and all the considerations that go into understanding who each customer is, you've got the individual and business disruptions that are part of this. At the end of the day, this is a construction project. This does have intimate impacts within a customer's facility. And these are just kind of uniquenesses that the company is building a larger portfolio and larger plan to address to make sure that as we bring these projects to the public, ultimately we're providing a value proposition and having them understand why this is a technology they want to connect to and how this impacts them near-term and long-term wise and how this is a value to them. So just as a closing thought, this is a very comprehensive effort, both for staff, regulatory bodies, and utilities. So this is contingent upon kind of two separate elements. You've got introduction of a new service, thermal energy, and then placement of a new project type, the UTENs, into service. Collectively, this is an effort that is going to require input from over 100 business areas between the companies. So this is something that is taken very seriously by the business, and there is a lot of effort needed to make sure that these are successful at the end of the day. I believe that at one point it was indicated that it's been over 100 years since a new service was put into place by a utility in the state of New York, and I think this is very representative of kind of what the overall body of work needed here is.
Lovely. To Owen. Coming your way.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Owen Brady-Trachik, and I'm the director of the Future of Heat Solutions team within National Grid, and I'm here to talk to you today about our UTEN pilots and give a little bit of an update on that, building on some of the themes that Joe and Cole have already referenced in their remarks. As a quick overview of National Grid, many of you are probably familiar with us as a company, but we are one of the largest investor-owned utilities in the U.S. We service both Massachusetts and New York, and you can see in the service map there that we are focused in sort of the northern part of the upstate region as well as the west, and then down in Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and on Long Island in downstate New York, in addition to our service territory in Massachusetts. We do have areas where we are overlapping gas and electric utilities, but then we also have significant areas, including our entire downstate region, where we are only one of the two sides of the equation, and that has some interesting implications for how we think about this work and how we think about building it out. We are headquartered in the United Kingdom, and then, as you can see here, of course, we are committed to delivering safe and reliable energy to the customers and communities that we serve, the use of energy there being intentional as we think about how we incorporate thermal energy networks into our service going forward. I put in a little schematic here that we've used in some of our marketing materials around how we see thermal energy networks playing out. You can see that we're trying to replicate and in many cases draw parallels to the existing way that we put infrastructure into communities, installing lines in the right-of-way, potentially installing boreholes in the right-of-way, and then providing an easy and standardized interconnection with that infrastructure to customers who wish to receive thermal energy from us instead of natural gas as they do today. There's a lot more on these slides that I recommend everyone take a look at afterwards. They will be distributed. So in summary of our filings, and you can see here specifically the December 15th filings that were made referencing Joe's comments around the stagegate process, I wanted to be very specific. So if you do look up the case on the Master Matter website, this is where you will find the December 15th filings. We've put forward 4 pilot proposals, 2 of them in our upstate New York region and 2 of them in our downstate New York region. The Long Island pilot was proposed in partnership with PSC&G Long Island, as they were one of the utilities that ultimately was subject to the legislation. And you can see here, the total estimated cost of the 4 pilots as of the December 15th filing was $416 million. That is, of course, a significant amount of money. We make absolutely no we don't take that lightly whatsoever. We recognize this to be a critical investment and a very significant decision facing the regulators as they evaluate all of these pilot proposals from all of the different utilities. At the same time, as Cole was just mentioning, this is the first time in 100 years that we're building out an entirely new utility infrastructure network, and therefore there are costs that will go along with that. So we're trying to focus in on the value of these pilots and what they will bring to customers. You can see that they are broken down here across the 4 pilots. They are all in disadvantaged communities. That was something that was important to us, and we also really wanted to focus in on scalability of these pilots. And when I talk about scalability, I either mean scalability within the particular pilot or replicability in terms of how we might be able to deploy this across the state and in different communities. I will just add here the 5,550 metric tons of carbon emissions annually that would be avoided by these systems. I looked this up last night, and that's equivalent to about 14 million miles driven by a gasoline-powered light-duty vehicle every single year. So just to put that in slightly different terms. Going into each of the pilots in a little bit more detail, our Syracuse pilot is an interesting one. This is actually proposing to take thermal energy from the outfall of the Syracuse wastewater treatment plant. That's a pretty significant resource within the community. We've heard conversations about that within some of the panels earlier today. The exciting thing is this is a facility that will be present in that community as long as there are humans present in that community. And so we're really interested to see what that could mean as a resource for both current and future development plans within the city. The amount of capacity that would come from that is sizable. And in fact, the customers that we are proposing to connect within our pilot would represent only about 1/4 of the thermal energy, meaning that there would be significant expansion capabilities present there. That's the scalability that I was talking about within this particular project. It is one of the more expensive projects, and so again, we're certainly being cognizant of the cost, and we're thinking about how we can manage that as we take that forward. The lines on this image are a little bit light, and I apologize for that, but you can see the blue line starting up near the lake and then sort of running down and going into the inner harbor area where there's a significant amount of planned development. One of the things that I think we can take from Jens' comments this morning is that as we think about new builds, it's a great opportunity to leverage both stringent building design standards as well as new technologies that are extremely efficient to help take advantage of those thermal resources. Staying in upstate to talk about our next project, which was proposed in Troy. This is a really interesting one because it talks about a different business model, a unique business model where a third party would be the owner of the thermal resource. This was actually a project that was sort of conceived of by the Troy LDC, and they would be the ones that would ultimately own the borehole field within Troy. That's an exciting and interesting proposition because, of course, we don't own the wells that produce natural gas today. We don't own, in many cases, the power plants that produce the electricity that is distributed to our customers. It may therefore make sense in the future for us not to own the resources that are producing thermal energy that would be distributed using our networks. So it would potentially allow for some differentiation that might allow for optimization and ultimately us to play the facilitation role that we do today in terms of connecting customers to a standardized service that they'd be able to leverage. So we're looking at connecting some customers in the downtown core of Troy. There's a park near the river that would host the borehole field. And then there's phases 2 and I believe 3 as well for this project that are also under some consideration. Both of these projects were part of NYSERDA's Program Opportunity Notice 4614 that Donovan mentioned in his comments this morning. We thought that was a really exciting opportunity to build on some of the work that had already been done to look at the feasibility of these and to leverage some interest that had already been generated in the communities around these potential projects. Shifting to downstate, we have two proposals. First is in our KEDNY territory, Keyspan Energy Delivery, New York, for those that are curious. This is in Brooklyn, the borough of Brooklyn, and it would be connecting some buildings, some New York City Housing Authority or NY-GEO buildings to some adjacent commercial properties. Now, this might not on its face seem like something that is necessarily all that scalable. We're providing a lot of energy to multifamily buildings and interconnecting to some neighboring properties. However, there are a lot of dense multifamily buildings within the city. They often are neighbored by sort of low-rise, light-density commercial, and so thinking about how that could become a blueprint for serving more of these customers, especially those that have been historically disadvantaged and have not had access to these types of solutions, is something that we think is important and interesting, even if ultimately the diversification or the source of the thermal resource for this project is not as novel as in some of the other cases. So we're looking at this very closely, and you can see there are plans to look a little bit beyond the footprint that we've described here into some of the MTA dewatering efforts. That's been a topic of a lot of discussion in New York City, as well as the nearby 26th Ward wastewater treatment plant, should there be further expansion. And there is also the large urban village redevelopment that's happening adjacent to the church, which is right next to this property. That's going to mean a lot of development, a lot of new growth in the area, so we're thinking about ways that we could potentially serve as a foundation for that also in the future. Finally, out on Long Island, there is Suffolk County Community College, and so the proposal is to connect a couple of buildings on the eastern part of their campus and then run the loop out to the adjacent neighborhood. Now, this is pretty similar to a lot of the campus projects that have been done thus far. We heard Smith College referenced earlier. Of course, Colorado Mesa and others have been points of conversation at these conferences in the past. So the question might be, well, why would we be doing this? There continues to be significant interest from the higher ed community in terms of putting in these systems as they seek to achieve their decarbonization goals. The question, therefore, of how could we leverage that investment, how could we leverage the infrastructure to potentially serve the communities that they often are deeply integrated with, and how could we think about this as sort of the foundation for a broader 10 is something that we continue to find interesting. So that's what we're looking at doing with this one. Also, the arena that would be sort of a key component of this system does utilize 185-degree water today. So that's something that I think a lot of people on the surface might say would be difficult to accomplish with an electrification approach. So we're excited to kind of look at that a little bit more deeply, to think about cascading systems, to think about potential for hybridization and ways that we might be able to serve that customer so that we don't think of it as simply something that's just too hard to do and we're going to walk away from it. So we're going to continue to look at that project, think about ways that it might be able to be done and be done in compliance with the legislation that has been put forward. Finally, I'll just put this up here. We do have our website. There's a QR code on the bottom in case anyone doesn't want to type in the web address, and this is where you can find information about all of our proposals in addition to the Master Matter website. And I'll really just echo the themes that Cole was bringing up in his comments. As we're doing these projects, we're trying to integrate thermal resources, potential developers that have a vested interest in the financial and operational aspects of the thermal resources, with customers who have timelines, capital constraints, environmental and sustainability considerations that they're working with, as well as all of the preconceived notions about both geothermal, utilities, electrification, et cetera. And that's really sort of an interesting and complex situation to try to manage. And as we work through this, we really have been appreciative of the DPS staff's engagement on this topic, the stagegate process that you've put forward, and the way that it's allowed us to continue to iterate on this as we hope to come to a good conclusion in terms of the pilots that do go forward and figure out the blueprints that we'll be able to take to expand this as we look beyond the initial pilot proposals. Thank you very much.
Lovely. All right, Caitlin, you're up. Knock 'em dead. Break a leg, I don't know. There's all these terrible expressions.
Great. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm last, and I'll try to keep it short so we can get to some questions. I'm Caitlin Sukata. I work at Con Edison, and I'm part of the UTEN team. So this is Con Edison. I think all of you are pretty familiar with us in New York City and Westchester, electric, gas, and steam. And then we have a sister utility, Orange and Rockland. I'm not talking about their project today, but they also have put forth a project in Haverstraw. So I just wanted to mention that in addition to Con Edison. Owen had one, so we have to have a photo, and ours has cute snowflakes. So this is just for like the general public on our website. So we think about this stuff all the time, but we actually had to define what was a thermal energy network. And so this was, I thought, a really nice graphic to show the diversity of loads, so the different types of buildings that connect, and also the different waste heat sources. This is background I think that Joe covered. I had here waiting on compliance letters. I was going to do like a nod or a nudge, but we got the letters today, so I don't have to do that. And now we're moving forward with that 9-month period for engineering design and customer agreements. So these are our 3 projects. The first is Mount Vernon, located in Westchester. The highlights here are that there are 2 loops that are interconnected. And you'll see that in the middle, in different font, it says Energy Center. So there will actually be a physical building that we will be building or purchasing that will include some heat pump technologies, some pumps, maybe some backup systems as well. On the left in green is leak-prone pipe area. So here there'll be a number of buildings that we'll be trying to fully electrify. So we can move them over to UTEN and electric as opposed to the current gas that they have. So that's kind of a sub-pilot and a sub-focus of this project that we're really excited about. Some other pieces about this is just that it is geothermal boreholes, so we're looking for 2 or 3 locations. Over 100 boreholes is what we're thinking right now, and up to 76 buildings. There's also some diversity of load here, so we have fire stations, we have a community center, and also a number of single-family homes and multifamily homes, a number of which are low and moderate income customers. The second project is Chelsea, which is located in Manhattan. This connects some NYCHA buildings, New York City Housing Authority, in addition to finding that waste heat from a building that has a data center in it. So you can see there's a line running along 16th Street, so the waste heat provided from that building, including the data center, will then run down and connect to 4 different buildings. 2 of those buildings are going to have full VRF systems, so that'll be heating and cooling, and then the rest will all include domestic hot water. There's actually an existing central plant that we'll be leveraging there for the hot water. There is some proximity kind of at scale as we're thinking about this project, either to potentially connect to the river. These buildings actually are part of a redesign and rebuild. So following the pilot, these buildings will be rebuilt. And so here there will also be an energy center, and the idea is that that building will be able to contain the majority of our equipment such that when the new buildings are built, we'll be able to reconnect. And I think for this project and for all of them, because of like the tremendous amount of work and effort and dollars associated, we don't want to think just about the next 2 or 3 or 5 years, but what is the longevity of these projects? What is the expansion opportunities? And where can we learn here to actually build out some future UTENs in our service territory? So last but not least is our Rockefeller Center project, also located in Manhattan. This has waste heat coming from Rockefeller Center. They have a large central plant on site. Here we won't have an actual physical energy center. There'll be space located in these buildings that already have the real estate. So we'll be putting the utility and customer-owned equipment directly inside these existing buildings. 3 large commercial buildings, which you can see, 1221 Avenue Americas, 1230, so all running along that 49th Street line, will be connected together to that energy center, and there'll be various pieces of equipment kind of in each of those buildings. The other piece that's really unique about this, which I'll talk a little bit about, is just the rate design here. So I think Cole mentioned just the sheer complexity across the entire utility if you're actually starting a new business. And so one piece of that is the rate. So how are you actually going to charge customers? And so what we're thinking about here is a more innovative kind of marketplace or almost temperature of use. So are we paying and incentivizing the right behavior? So if you are a thermal resource provider, so you have that waste heat, are we incentivizing you to actually contribute waste heat to the grid or to the loop when it's cold because we need it? And if it is too hot and we don't need that, making sure it's the same kind of economic structure. So that's just one level of complexity that we're thinking about for this commercial project. And across all of our 3, it's important to note that you have the residential customer, so it's kind of someone like me who maybe just has a thermostat, and you have other really sophisticated and advanced commercial projects like this one that already have a BMS that have much more capability to modulate and be maybe more efficient and sophisticated in the way that they're using this loop. So next steps, I think we talked as utilities like on the phone last week about all the different complexity and didn't want to all talk about the same thing. So I focused here on really the complexity of the rate design and the billing configurations. We first have to get the customers, specifically in Mount Vernon, there'll be a big outreach effort that we'll need to do, but the customers want to know how much they're going to pay, how expensive this is going to be, and we'll be actually creating a brand new bill. I think this is a really unique opportunity because most customers don't want to ever look at their utility bill, and so if we are going to provide a new service, how do we make that be a positive place for customers to see very clearly what they're paying for and get excited about this new technology for them. I will say that with that excitement, there is a lot of complexity. So both from the consumer of it, the provider from an energy thermal network perspective, the behavioral incentive, so if they are providing heat to the loop, what does that look like and how are we incentivizing it correctly? And then our own payment and billing process and structure to make sure that those bills are going out on time and are accurate. Last mention, we have a bill cap guarantee for customers too, so we want to make sure that they're taking a risk with us to get this new technology into their homes. And we don't want them to have to pay more than they would be paying otherwise. That being said, we have to make sure that they're not also taking advantage of the loop or using more energy than maybe they would need to. So trying to internalize that energy efficiency and reduction component in addition to the billing is something that we're going to spend a lot of time on doing. Okay, this is our website. You should go to it. Thank you very much.
Very good. Well done. All right, so let's jump into questions. And usually, the first question is something that we missed or didn't define. So, who's up? Yep.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benson from Micro Era Power up in Rochester, New York. My question's for Owen. The estimated greenhouse gas reduction for the Troy product was notably large compared to the capacity and the project costs. I'm just wondering what it's replacing.
So the majority of the customers in the Troy region are consuming natural gas today, so the baseline analysis that we've been doing has been for that. I do think that as we've looked at the analysis, there's been a bunch of questions, and this was actually something that was noted in the compliance letters that came out not that long ago, which we've been skimming a little bit at the tables, just around the sort of the timeline, the implications of the analysis, and so looking at how many years are included, what are the factors for carbon intensity, those sorts of things. So I think we can prepare a little bit more detail around the specifics and around how it breaks down for each of the projects, as well as whether or not it's accounting for any of the future phases. But to put it in simple terms for the customer's premises, it was most often replacing natural gas.
Okay. We'll go there and then there. You're number 2. And state your name.
Hi, Neil Dryzik with Consumers Energy. Question for you on the feasibility study itself. I think there's a difference between having a real technically feasible site that has all the benefits and advantages versus the customer's willingness to participate in it, right? So how do you deal with the difference of the two? I think I assimilated something with the stagegate process that's in place, but can you tell me a little bit more about sort of the approach between tackling those two separate issues?
Is that addressed to someone specific?
To the panel.
Oh, good. So, yep, a non-Owen panelist. Go ahead.
Cole Burgess here with NYS Dept and RG&E. So to your point, projects do not construct unless you have customer interest. I would say that there has been a varying approach across companies of kind of how a project is developed. So each company has some understanding of a feasibility study on a district scale geothermal system or something of the like to put forth a UTEN. And our company was one that did customer engagement after the technical design, and the customer was not interested. And as of yesterday, we are no longer advancing the Norwich project due to the lack of customer interest. So I would say as far as learnings from the industry space, as we can influence other utilities that are evaluating this in other states, that there is a need to understand this both from a technical and a customer compliance, or I guess a customer adoption perspective. So that is, I think, one of the large lessons learned from the stage gating process is to understand what the customer interest is prior to really evaluating the complexity of the project and advancing those through ratepayer dollars.
Back here first, and then behind you, and then I'll get to you, okay?
I'm Sarah Collada. Professionally, I work with Siemens Smart Infrastructure, but I'm asking my question as chair of the Tompkins County Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board, who is a participant in the case because we've been, Ithaca, I'm asking probably Cole, but it's building on this question. Our board felt that engaging customers is going to be a very big lift for the project. I mean, we totally support the UTEN proposal, but we know our people locally, and we know that there's a gap in communication between utilities and especially the residential customers, but even some of the commercial customers. And yet the Public Service Commission process almost seems to get in the way of the sort of organic, ongoing communication all the way through the entire process. Because if it takes 3 years, customers who were engaged before and saw an opportunity, after 3 years, they've had to move on. And so I'm wondering if there's learning about like how community organizations can be engaged early on and really
Okay,
a broad
great.
engagement process. Sorry for the length.
No, that's okay. It's an important question. So almost any of you could take that, even though Cole is directed at you because it's in your service territory.
Yeah, so to your point, these projects do require both customer enrollment as a whole or customer involvement as a whole. So to the point earlier, the community is a customer as well. We are putting in service or proposing to put in service a totally new clean energy project type. We are looking as far as stage 2 to start to really understand how to leverage community partnerships. The company has other community partnerships that they are advancing, other opportunities such as non-pipeline alternatives in the greater Tompkins County area. So as we have learnings from those community partnerships, we will look to leverage those moving forward now that we do have a more affirmative understanding of direction forward from the regulatory space as we do move into the detailed design, which does require site visits, so on and so forth, within the customer premises.
Yeah, I think that's a big question and one that certainly in Massachusetts, Eversource, we already have customers engaged. They're putting the pipes in the ground, so there's learnings there, and even National Grid's Massachusetts programs are further along in that way. And one of the differences in Massachusetts is there was more of a sense that it was funded all the way through to the end, right from the beginning, where the stagegate. So there is a conservative element to the way New York is approaching it that certainly is something we're going to have to figure out how to get that customer engagement going in a timely fashion. I think it's a good question, not a simple answer, of course.
John, can I just add one
Yeah.
thing to it too, which is, I know my undergraduate background is mechanical engineering. We're in a conference where there are a fair number of us that are engineers or have an engineering mindset, let's say it in that way. And so there is something incredibly seductive about finding the optimal connection between buildings and thermal resources and creating that balance. And I think that that is a beautiful thing to do when it works, but I do not think that being able to have sort of a dogmatic adherence to that optimization is the way that we will be able to scale this going forward. And I think you're pulling on a very important thread here, which is we might have to put out a system that is oversized at the beginning so that it's ready when customers are ready, or we might have to be ready to build out a system in the future if customers are not yet at the point where they want to connect. We'll have to think about what that process looks like, and I know that's something that the regulatory staff and agency is looking at very closely.
All right. In the green. No, this way. Yep, good. Well done.
Krista McMurray from RMF Engineering.
Where are you from? I'm sorry?
RMF Engineering.
Indeed.
What's that?
Great. Good. I just didn't hear it.
Gotcha. It's kind of a little bit of a follow-up to, I guess, both of them. Have you considered perhaps doing the engagement before the design? Because perhaps maybe you want to see if you take a survey of most of the people in the city or the state, I'm sorry, I lived in New York City for years. But if you took a survey and said, oh, there's a big blob of people right here, there's 50 clients right there that all are interested, and maybe look to see whether that's a place for a project, rather than identifying a project, are the people interested in that order?
Okay, yeah, so maybe engage earlier.
So we're at the point where we already have these projects that happened, not for all of us, but I think a lot of us did kind of like an RFP, RFI. And I think right now we're balancing a timeline where we needed projects quite quickly. So we didn't have the ability to spend a couple years to canvass our customers, but wanted to see what was already in the market. And I think balancing that with some commercial customers who can get ready right away and have a yes or no, versus being very thoughtful about touch points with customers. Like for stage 2, we're going to be building these out and having conversations with customers and being in their homes. And if the project does not move forward, then the utility has to think really hard about making sure that those customers have a good and positive experience. And there's so many times where customers do not have a positive experience with their electric or gas company, that I think that balance is honestly going to be really tricky for us. So what we want to do is engage now and provide them with a value now. So maybe that's some kind of energy audit where they get some light bulbs, or they have something where they're already getting value out of being our customer, even if the project doesn't move forward. So we have that data and can make the best case possible. I think at scale, with the regulatory framework in place, yes, I think that's where we want to get to, but we have to prove out that we can even make this happen in the first place before I think we can go to that next step.
Yeah, maybe, Owen, can you just talk a little bit about you put out an application actually to communities in Massachusetts, which is different. That isn't the approach we've taken here, and maybe some of the compare and contrast, because you're in both worlds.
Yeah, so in Massachusetts, we did define a process whereby customers or communities applied to the program with the thought that you're alluding to, which is, let's have it be responsive to interest from customers. And I think the challenge is customers might not necessarily know what is required to serve them with the system that they're proposing. They might say, we would love to do this, but there might not be a thermal resource nearby. And even if it's geothermal, right, and I don't want to say that in any sort of a critical way, they might not know the space required for the boreholes. And it's a chicken and the egg kind of a situation, which I do think is tricky. And that's where wanting to be dynamic, wanting to think about how can we standardize this, how can we look at the broader landscape for both thermal resources and interested customers, and trying to create that facilitation in the future is hopefully how we'll get this to scale.
All right, I'm going to take one more question, and I promised you, so, yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Manisha Rane Fondacaro, President, Sol-Led Solutions, LLC. So what is the largest distance between the thermal like well and the customer? What is the largest distance you can have?
So she's asking, what is the largest distance between the thermal resource and the customer, essentially? I don't answer questions like that. That's why I have a panel.
So I think within our portfolio of proposals, our Syracuse project or potentially our Long Island project has the longest run of pipe between off-taking customers and what we would consider to be the thermal source. In general, we tried to keep them not very large because, of course, there is loss of thermal energy anytime you have the fluid going through the pipe. And so looking at areas that are dense enough that there's a lot of off-takers, not so dense that it's impossible to site their resource, to site the thermal resources, especially if they're boreholes, makes a lot of sense. And areas with very low density probably would have a bit of a Laffer curve in terms of their ability to really optimize the thermal resources in a theoretical construct. So I would say we have probably on the order of no more than sort of thousands of feet, like nothing more that I think than a half mile of run would probably be our longest.
Yep. As a consultant in the industry, most of my answers are it depends, and easier said than done. So we're going to wrap that up. So let's give a hand to the panel. Thanks so much for jumping up. And there's breaking news, so we're all going to have to poke around and see who made through the stage gates. Woo! That'll be good. Let me also just tell folks that there's a break right now, and then at 4 o'clock in this room, There is the municipal and private thermal energy networks. So that's going to be more around the Pond 4614 work and some other projects like that that Donovan's going to be running us through. And then in the room next to us is incorporating geothermal domestic hot water in a multifamily building. It's about the Zero Place project and the domestic hot water system in New Paltz. And then refrigerants are a change-in, and that is in the policy and programs, just about some of the HFC reductions and how that'll affect heat pumps. All right, thanks so much, everybody.